In just 3 minutes, a single USB drive dragged House Speaker Mike Johnson from the heights of power straight into the eye of a political firestorm. The setting? A closed-door congressional hearing. Harsh lights. Reporters crammed shoulder to shoulder. Lawmakers holding their breath. Johnson walked in like he always did. Calm, confident, untouchable. But across from him sat Jasmine Crockett. Cool, silent, and holding one small object he never saw coming. The one that would bury his career. She plugged the USB into the projector. No warning, no speech, just video. And then, there he was. Johnson. Sitting in a dark room, whispering to one of Jeffrey Epstein's closest associates. Swapping documents, his voice crystal clear. If that list leaks, we're all finished. The room froze. His face went pale. And Crockett? She said just one line. You questioned my qualifications? Now, let me ask you something. So here's the real question. Who sent Jasmine Crockett that video? And why now? Hit like, tap subscribe, and stay locked in. Because this takedown is just getting started. The hearing room felt unusually tight that morning, not physically, but emotionally. The kind of atmosphere where conversations were quieter than usual, and eye contact lingered too long. People weren't sure why they were nervous, but they were. The kind of tension that builds not from what is said, but from what is expected. Phones buzzed softly in pockets, staffers whispered in corners. The smell of burnt coffee and cheap perfume hung in the air. Overhead, the long fluorescent lights hummed without mercy. A camera crew adjusted its final angles, while a young intern dropped his clipboard twice in 5 minutes. On the surface, it was just another hearing. But something wasn't right. People could feel it in their chests. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the double doors opened. Speaker Mike Johnson walked in like he was stepping onto the floor of a megachurch. His navy suit was flawless, his tie subtly patriotic. The American flag pin on his lapel gleamed under the lights. His expression was rehearsed, but not robotic. A smile made for press photos, the kind of expression designed to say, I'm in control. He shook hands with a few allies, nodded at a reporter, then took his seat at the center of the room. A few Republicans clapped softly. He didn't look at Jasmine Crockett once. He didn't need to. She was, in his mind, a background figure. Someone meant to react, not lead. But Crockett didn't flinch. She sat motionless, hands folded, eyes still. The purple of her blazer caught the overhead lights in just the right way. It was elegant, but firm. A statement without raising her voice. Her stillness was what unnerved people the most. Jasmine Crockett was a fighter. She spoke with fire, with rhythm, with defiance. Today, she was still. Not passive, but prepared. And that stillness made Johnson glance over just once, briefly, like a man hearing thunder on a clear day. He started speaking the way politicians often do when they believe the room belongs to them. Smooth cadence, familiar phrases, tradition, moral values, family, restoring faith in the institution. Words meant to lull, to remind people who the grown-up in the room was there. Reporters scribbled dutifully. Aides nodded. Johnson smiled through it all, pausing with practiced timing to let his words settle. But something felt hollow about it. Maybe it was the way the gallery stayed unusually silent, or how Jasmine Crockett hadn't taken out a pen, hadn't looked down once, hadn't moved at all. Then, without warning, she stood. Not a dramatic rise, not sudden, just deliberate. She stood like someone who already knew the ending to the story. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small black USB drive, and walked toward the projector at the front of the room. She didn't look at Johnson. She didn't ask permission. She didn't speak. The room shifted, shoulders tensed, pens froze mid-sentence. A cameraman leaned in. Crockett plugged the USB into the port like she'd done it 100 times before. And then she pressed play. No announcement, no build-up, just action. The screen blinked to life with the flicker of a poorly lit video. Grainy at first, Then sharpening, a man and another figure seated in a room with no windows. The camera was hidden, likely placed in a vent or behind a wall panel. For a moment, it was hard to identify anyone, until a face turned toward the lens Mike Johnson. He was younger in the video, but unmistakable. Clean cut, serious. He was leaning forward, speaking in a hushed tone. Next to him sat a man whose face had been splashed across tabloid headlines years ago, someone known to be in the orbit of Jeffrey Epstein. They weren't just talking. They were passing documents across the table, carefully, deliberately. Crockett remained silent as the video played. The room didn't breathe. Then Johnson's voice, clear as day. "If that list leaks, we're all finished." The silence that followed hit like a punch to the chest. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the steady clicking of live transcription stopped. Someone in the back row dropped a pen. A camera's motor whirred, zooming tighter onto Johnson's now motionless face. His hands, once resting confidently on the table, had curled into white-knuckled fists. Jasmine finally turned. Her voice, when it came, was soft, controlled. "You questioned my qualifications?" She paused. Let the words settle. "Now, let me ask you something." The room didn't erupt, it froze. Because everyone knew this wasn't politics anymore. This was something else, something colder, something final. And Jasmine Crockett had just pulled the pin. The screen flickered, washed in a faint bluish hue from the projector, casting a strange glow across the wood-paneled walls of the chamber. The image wasn't perfect. It was grainy, like it had been filmed with a hidden camera from behind a vent. But the faces were clear enough that no one in the room could deny what they were seeing. Mike Johnson sat across a narrow table from a man older than him, balding, suited, and calm. His name wasn't spoken, but everyone recognized him. He had once been photographed stepping off Epstein's private jet. He'd denied everything, of course, back then. Most of the press had moved on, but his face, his presence, was enough. They weren't chatting. This wasn't small talk. This was a transaction. Johnson leaned in, elbows on the table, voice low, jaw tight. The other man slid a manila envelope across the table. Johnson opened it, looked briefly at the contents, and nodded once. Then, in a voice more chilling than dramatic, he said, "If that list leaks, we're done." The chamber didn't erupt. It recoiled, like it had touched something that burned. A ripple passed through the room, subtle but unmistakable. A senator shifted awkwardly in his seat. Another leaned forward, as if trying to see better, as if somehow clarity might change the meaning. Phones lifted, cameras zoomed, and aides no longer pretended not to record. The usual quiet professionalism of the chamber had dissolved into something else. Quiet panic. The screen continued playing. Johnson's tone grew more agitated in the video. "We can't afford any surprises. That woman from Arizona, she gets sworn in, she adds one more signature to that petition, and the whole damn thing comes out." The woman from Arizona was Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, the Latina Democrat who had won her seat 2 weeks prior. She hadn't been sworn in yet. Johnson had cited procedural delays, but now that excuse had a name, a motive, and it was playing on screen for the world to see. Mike Johnson, the same man who just minutes ago had been praising constitutional order and moral clarity, was now frozen in place. His eyes locked on the screen, his breath shallow, his face no longer calm, no longer composed. His jaw worked slightly, as if trying to bite down panic, but there was nowhere to hide. Then came Jasmine Crockett's voice. It wasn't raised, it didn't need to be. "You questioned my record," she said. Her tone was surgical, her words spaced with control. "Now let's examine yours." She didn't blink, didn't turn toward him. She simply looked ahead, letting the weight of her words echo louder than any gavel. Johnson opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came. He glanced toward the committee chair, toward his aides, toward anyone who might rescue him from the moment. But all eyes were on the screen. The next frame showed a close-up of the folder's contents, names partially visible, financial entries, Timestamps. Jasmine reached forward, tapped pause. The screen froze on the image of Johnson's hand resting on the file. She turned, not to the speaker, but to the room. "This," she said, "isn't about partisanship. This is about truth, and truth doesn't care about your rank." Silence. Even the gallery, a place usually buzzing with whispers, was still. The only sound was the soft whir of a ceiling vent above. Johnson blinked rapidly. His hands were now gripping the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles had turned bone white. His voice, when it finally came, was brittle. "This is taken out of context," he managed. Crockett didn't even look at him. "Good," she replied coldly. "We haven't gotten to the context yet." A murmur spread like fire through the crowd. Everyone knew what that meant. This wasn't the end of the video. It was just the beginning. The chamber remained silent, but something had shifted. The air no longer felt sharp, it felt heavy. The kind of stillness that follows not rage, but reflection. Jasmine Crockett didn't look at the screen anymore. She took a breath, calm but thick with memory, and turned back to the microphone. Her voice was low now, slower. The rhythm of someone not trying to win a debate, but to open a wound with care. "For years," she began, "I didn't stand in rooms like this. I stood in courtrooms no one ever filmed. Fluorescent lights, broken benches, a metal detector that beeped even when you had nothing left to carry." She looked out over the gallery, her voice threading between rows of stunned faces. "I defended over 5,000 people, not corporations, not politicians, people. The woman who missed 2 buses and was late to court, so the judge issued a bench warrant. The single father who couldn't afford child support because he'd been laid off and then got arrested for contempt. The 19-year-old pulled over because of a taillight, but ended up charged with assault after a cop got scared." She paused, blinking back something she wouldn't let fall. "I met people who were poor, uneducated, forgotten, but I also met people who were brave. Braver than most in this room." She tapped the folder gently. "During the summer of 2020, I defended over 400 peaceful protesters, pro bono, young people, old veterans, single mothers. They were arrested for standing on sidewalks, for chanting in parks, for holding signs that said, simply, 'Don't kill us.' While they fought for justice in the streets, I fought for their freedom in the courts. For free." The room stayed silent. A few in the gallery wiped their eyes. They were called rioters, thugs, enemies of order. But I looked them in the eye, and I saw fear. Not because of what they were doing, but because of what might be done to them. She stepped forward slightly. "I didn't do it for clout. I did it because if no one stood between them and that system, they'd disappear, just like so many already had." A beat. Then she added quieter, "Some of them did." She let that linger before continuing. Her voice changed, softened, not in strength, but in intimacy. She wasn't talking to a crowd now. She was remembering one face. There was a girl in Bowie County, 15, arrested for stealing allergy medicine and a bottle of cranberry juice. A faint laugh escaped her lips. Not amusement, just disbelief, even now. She didn't have a mother. Her father had OD'd the year before. She lived with an aunt who barely fed her. I asked her, when I first met her in Holding, why that? And she said, "I didn't want to sneeze in school again." Crockett's voice wavered, just slightly. They charged her with petty theft and resisting. Wanted to send her to a juvenile centre for 6 months. No one showed up for her hearing. Not one adult. She looked across the room, her gaze heavier now, slower. I fought for her like she was my own blood. Found school records, letters from a teacher. Even got the store clerk to testify he never intended to press charges. We won. She walked out of that courtroom. Jasmine exhaled, eyes glistening. "She still sends me letters," she said softly. "Every birthday, every Christmas. Last one said she's thinking about applying to law school. Said she wants to defend girls like herself someday." She smiled, bittersweet. "Tell me," she asked the chamber, not angry, just exhausted, "which committee would I be qualified for if all I did was save her?" No one answered. They couldn't. Because for the first time in that hearing, they understood who she was. Not just a name, not just a face on C-SPAN, but someone who had walked through fire for people they'd never seen and never would. The chamber was quiet now, not because the tension had faded, but because it had taken root. After Jasmine Crockett's last words, even the lawmakers who had once rolled their eyes now sat straighter in their seats, listening. For the first time that morning, no one was waiting to speak. They were waiting to be spoken to. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply turned a page in her folder and began. "For 8 years," she said, eyes on Johnson, "you worked with the Alliance Defending Freedom not as a clerk, not on the sidelines, as senior legal counsel, as their spokesperson. You weren't a bystander, you were their voice." She placed a printed document on the table. The camera zoomed in on the letterhead. Everyone recognized the logo, bold serif letters underlined in patriotic blue. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated this organization a hate group. Not because of political disagreement, not because of theology, but because of what they did to children. She lifted a second page, highlighted, annotated, color-coded. You fought to uphold laws criminalizing private relationships between consenting adults. You advocated for the suppression of marriage equality. You helped promote what was once called conversion therapy. The word hung in the room like poison. You called it compassion. You said you were protecting families. But let's talk about what that really looked like. She opened a third document. Behind her, the screen shifted from black to a projection of a public apology, dated 2013, from Alan Chambers, the founder of Exodus International. "You partnered with them," she said. "Exodus International, the largest conversion therapy organization in America. For years, they told LGBTQ youth they were broken, that God could fix them, that they could pray the gay away. And when the therapy didn't work, they didn't blame the methods. They blamed the children." Her voice dropped, but her words cut deeper. Some of those children didn't make it. Gasps broke out quietly in the gallery. Some overdosed, some disappeared, some ended it in the very churches that told them they were abominations. And you, Mr. Speaker, you didn't just turn away. You handed them the microphone. You called it morality. You called it faith. Johnson shifted, but said nothing. "I believe in faith," Jasmine said, "but faith without compassion isn't righteousness. It's cruelty in a robe." She turned to a fresh page and paused. "This next part," she said slowly, "I debated whether I should include it, not because it isn't public. It is. You preached about it. You wrote about it. You told congregations to follow your example. But I hesitated, because it involves your family." A flicker of life returned to Johnson's face. His posture stiffened. "But then I realized," she continued, "you brought it into the public square. You turned it into policy. And when a man uses his private life to justify public control over others, that life becomes fair to examine." She held up a transcript. "In 2022, at a sermon in Benton, Louisiana, you spoke about a program called Covenant Eyes. You described it as part of your family's commitment to accountability. Software that takes screenshots of every website visited, every minute of every day. Artificial intelligence scans each image. If it detects something inappropriate, lustful, as you described, it sends a report to a designated accountability partner." She paused and let the next words settle in before she said them. "And your accountability partner is your 17-year-old son." A collective inhale swept through the room. Some in the gallery stiffened, others looked away. Reporters froze mid-keystroke. "You monitor each other's devices. He sees what you see. You see what he sees. He is notified, instantly, if the software flags any inappropriate content." She let the image linger without embellishment. There was no need to dramatize what was already deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Speaker, you've spent your entire career trying to regulate the private lives of others. You've written laws that police sexuality. You've spoken against LGBTQ rights, reproductive freedom, and gender identity. You've claimed you're protecting the moral fiber of the nation. She stepped closer to the table now. Her voice wasn't angry. It was precise, controlled, devastating. But here's the truth. You police others while needing your own child to police you. There it was, the crack. Johnson flinched. The mask didn't fall, not all at once, but the first fracture was visible. His mouth tightened. His fingers trembled faintly. He looked toward the chairman, as if to interrupt, but couldn't form the words Crockett didn't stop. You've built your legacy on distrust. You've taught people to fear their neighbors, their families, even themselves. You've turned surveillance into salvation. And now, with the highest security clearance in Congress, second in line to the presidency, you've installed third-party software on all your devices, uploading screenshots to a private server, with your son watching. The room had gone past silence. It was now still in that uneasy, almost spiritual way. The kind of stillness that creeps in after something sacred has been broken. Jasmine Crockett stepped back from the mic, her eyes never leaving Johnson's. "This isn't accountability," she said quietly. "This is control dressed up as virtue. And now that control has become a national security threat." No one breathed, because no one knew what could possibly come next. And the answer? Crockett did, because the next folder was already waiting on the table. And it was thicker than all the others combined. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She let the discomfort from the last revelation settle, let it sink into the wood of the hearing room like smoke clinging to old carpet. She knew the next chapter wouldn't be personal. It would be national, and she wanted everyone listening to feel the difference. She slid the next folder toward her and opened it without ceremony. "Let's talk about democracy," she said quietly. She pulled out a stack of court filings, photocopied, highlighted, underlined, and held one page up to the cameras. "This," she said, "is a copy of the amicus brief filed on December 10th, 2020 in Texas v. Pennsylvania. The lead signature on the list of 126 House Republicans, Mike Johnson." She placed it down, then another. "This is an email you sent, Mr. Speaker, the day before the brief was filed, addressed to members of your caucus. Your words, 'President Trump called me this morning to say how much he appreciates our work. This is the big one.'" Crockett's voice grew tighter, colder. "You knew the case had no merit. You knew Texas had no standing to sue other states over their elections. You knew it would be thrown out, and it was, unanimously." She tapped the final page of the Supreme Court ruling. "Texas has not demonstrated a judicially cognizable interest." One of the shortest rulings in Supreme Court history. No ambiguity, no grey area. She paused. "But that didn't stop you." She stepped forward now, her voice firmer. "You led 126 members of Congress to support a legal theory so flimsy it collapsed on contact. You knew the lie, and you advanced it anyway. You didn't just betray your oath, Mr. Speaker. You tried to break the system that gave you the microphone you're speaking into today." Johnson didn't move. He sat rigid, but something behind his eyes had shifted. He wasn't angry. He was somewhere between frozen and haunted, as if a part of him had already seen where this was going. Crockett took one more step. "You filed lawsuits you knew would fail," she said slowly. "You traded law for loyalty, the Constitution for convenience. And when the legal failures piled up, you didn't stop. You just got more desperate." She reached down and clicked a remote. Behind her, the screen came alive again. 5.2. The ghost of Hugo Chávez. The clip began with a radio station logo, a host's cheerful southern drawl, background music fading in and out, then the unmistakable voice of Mike Johnson. "There's real merit to these allegations about Dominion software. It's very possible these systems were created with algorithms developed by Hugo Chávez." There was a moment where nothing happened. Then the gallery reacted, not with shouting, but with a stunned collective murmur. A low wave of disbelief swept the room. Crockett didn't move. She let it play a few more seconds, then muted the audio. She looked around the chamber slowly, almost like she was waiting for someone else to say it. Hugo Chávez, she said, the late president of Venezuela, died in 2013. She raised an eyebrow. You said, publicly, that a dead dictator from South America helped rig the 2020 US election through software. The words hung in the room like a bad echo. Sir, I want to be respectful, but I also need to be clear, she said. Hugo Chávez had been dead for 7 years when that clip was recorded. You didn't just chase conspiracy theories. You chased ghost stories and you wrapped them in constitutional language to give them the illusion of legitimacy. She looked down for a moment, then straight back at Johnson. Do you understand what it means when someone in your position invokes dead foreign leaders and coded software as the reason millions of Americans voted the way they did? She didn't wait for him to answer. You told the public our democracy was corrupted by the undead, that ballots were changed by the ghost of a socialist dictator. You made it sound plausible, sound real, and people believed you. Her voice dropped into something more somber, almost like a prayer. And then they acted on that belief. Silence again. Not the stunned kind from before. This one was heavier. Like everyone in the room had suddenly remembered where they were on January 6th. Jasmine held the remote tightly, then clicked the screen off. When lies like these take root, she said, they don't just make headlines, they make gallows. They make broken windows. They make flags carried through blood. She looked at Johnson. And for the first time all morning, her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from restraint. You turned grief into propaganda. You turned fear into fire. And when the Capitol burned, you blamed the ashes on someone else. Johnson opened his mouth, barely. But he had no defense. There was no script for what came next. Because the country had watched him break the truth. And now, it was watching the truth break him. Crockett returned to the microphone slowly, methodically, like a surgeon preparing for the final incision. There was no smirk, no satisfaction, just the stillness of someone who had carried truth for too long and was finally done keeping it quiet. This morning, she began, I mentioned Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, a Latina public servant from Arizona, a mother, a civil rights attorney. She won her election fair and clear. She held up a document. And yet, Mr. Speaker, you blocked her swearing in, citing procedural technicalities, delayed paperwork, routine vetting. But let's be honest, it wasn't about a signature. Crockett slid the next page across the table. The camera zoomed in. Petition number 2198. Release of the unredacted Epstein client list. Sponsor, Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva. You didn't block her because she was late. You blocked her because she was ready to open the files. The room stirred. Republican aides began whispering behind hands. One of them reached for their phone. Another tugged at a colleague's sleeve. Crockett didn't flinch. January 3rd, Grijalva filed this petition in her first 24 hours in DC. The goal was simple, transparency. To compel the Justice Department to release the unredacted Epstein records sealed under federal order since 2019. Her office received legal threats within 36 hours. She raised her voice, not to shout, but to cut through the static. And who signed that legal challenge? A pause. Your former law firm, Mr. Speaker, a firm that, until 6 months ago, still paid you residual fees. A beat of stunned silence. Then noise. Reporters shifting. Chairs creaking. A few gasps. This was no longer theoretical. It was structural. Crockett leaned in now, eyes locked on Johnson. The room felt like it was holding its breath. You've spent your career calling others immoral, deviant, dangerous. You used religion as a blade, slicing down anyone who didn't fit your design. Her tone sharpened. But let me be clear, this has never been about faith. She lifted a final folder, thick and marked, unsealed. This is about how power protects itself, how powerful men protect each other. You threw your weight behind culture wars while looking the other way when real predators walked past your office door. Her voice broke only once. You've spent your life condemning drag queens and trans kids while shaking hands with men who sold girls. And when someone tried to pull the curtain back, like Representative Grijalva, you didn't just stop her, you tried to erase her. The room exploded in silence. That kind of silence that feels like a scream held in a crowded chest. "You're not being targeted for your values," she finished. "You're being unmasked for your hypocrisy." The hearing room was no longer a hearing. It was a reckoning. Johnson sat motionless, lips parted, eyes wet. His team had stopped passing notes. The chairman looked pale. Outside the hearing, protesters had begun gathering. Chants echoed faintly through the stone walls. Inside, the dam burst. Reporters filed urgent dispatches. Cable news lit up. Hashtags trended. But it was the ethics committee, so not the internet, that moved fastest. By sundown, 3 formal complaints had been filed. 2 from his own party. And still, Johnson said nothing. Crockett looked at him one last time. No anger, no gloating. "Let me be clear," she said, voice steady. "You're not being persecuted for your faith." She held up the folder containing years of receipts, legal filings, recordings. "You're being held accountable for your actions." And with that, she sat down. The room was never the same. That night, her phone didn't stop vibrating. The first message came from a retired teacher in Shreveport. "I was fired for being gay. They called it misconduct. I lost my pension. Today, I finally felt seen." Then a young woman who survived conversion therapy. "My parents told me it was God's will. It was your voice that broke the chains." And then, quietly, a final message from a teenager in Bowie County. "I almost gave up. I really almost did. But I saw you today, and I didn't." Crockett stared at that one for a long time, and finally whispered to no one in particular, "The receipts never lie. Not when they come from courtrooms, not when they come from victims, and not when they come from the people finally speaking up."